Welcome to Write with Love. I'm Sarah Williams, best-selling author, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. Each week I chat to passionate and inspiring authors about their journey in creative writing. Some are traditionally published, some do it themselves. Everyone's journey is different, and everyone has something interesting to say. We all love love and love what we do. Today's show is brought to you by our amazing fans and supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the show and get some awesome bonus episodes, go to patreon.com/SarahWilliamsAuthor to learn more. Now here's today's show. G'day, I'm Sarah Williams, romance author and independent publisher at Serenade Publisher. Today I'm chatting to Natasha Lester. Thanks for joining me today, Natasha.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been a very busy lady of recent, and so can you just introduce yourself and tell us about your writing journey?
Sure. So my writing journey started somewhat later in life. I actually worked in marketing for 10 or 12 years. That was my degree that I first did at uni when I left high school. And I had lots of great jobs. I worked for L'Oreal Paris as marketing manager for Maybelline, and I had lots of lipsticks, which was great. Through that whole time, since I had been a child, I had a dream about being a writer in the back of my mind, and that was just something that I had always wanted to do, but didn't really know kind of how to do that. So we were in Melbourne. I was working for L'Oreal. My husband had come to Melbourne with me, and then he had to go back to Perth for his job. So I had to kind of quit my fabulous job and sort of start all over again, I guess. And I thought, well, that's kind of one of those moments where you can choose a different pathway. I could have got another marketing job, or I could do something different. So I decided I would go back to uni and explore this writing idea that I still had in my mind and hadn't been able to let go of. So I enrolled in a Master of Creative Arts, and I wrote a book as part of my master's thesis. And that was my very, very first novel. So it was sort of contemporary literary fiction. It was called What Is Left Over After, and it won the TAG Hungerford Award, which is like a prize for an unpublished manuscript, a bit like the Victorian Premier's Unpublished Manuscript Prize. And I think each state has something quite similar. And so winning that meant I got a publishing contract with Fremantle Press, which is a small independent publisher here in WA. They published my second book 2 years later in 2012, and then I had a bit of a change of direction, I guess. I've always loved historical fiction, and I suddenly had this story idea, which is what came out in A History of Mr. Fitzgerald, and I sat down to write that with a lot of doubt, not really knowing what I was doing. I hadn't written historical before. It wasn't my background. I knew I'd have to change publishers and agents because the people representing me at that time didn't publish that kind of fiction. But I wrote it anyway because I just loved the story and I loved the writing so much. And then was just really lucky that I was able to get an agent, and then Hachette picked it up. And since then, I've been so blessed to work with Hachette. They're amazing. And so they've published all three of my historicals: A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, Her Mother's Secret, and now The Paris Seamstress.
Excellent. And so you studied creative writing. So did you get a lot out of that? Would you recommend that's something people do?
Yeah, I did. For me, it was really good because I didn't know how to write a book. So having a supervisor who could just tell me to keep writing, because I assumed that everyone who wrote a book knew what they were writing about, and they had like a plan and a chapter by chapter outline, and they just kind of worked through that. Whereas when I sat down to write my book, I had like this tiny seed of an idea and nothing else. And my supervisor was the one who said, that's okay, you can still write a book that way. You just have to work on it page by page and trust the process. And that was probably the most important thing she said to me, because I'd never done it before. I didn't know to just trust like the universe that it would all work out. And so because she kept saying that, I just kept writing, and it was quite stressful because I'm so planned and organised in every other aspect of my life, but not when it comes to writing. And I still write in exactly the same way. I start with the seed of an idea, and literally it's just a page by page kind of process. So for me it was useful because I didn't know how to write a book, and my supervisor helped me work that out, and she made me keep going when I probably would have stopped, because I felt like I wasn't doing it the right way. But she was the kind of person who said there isn't a right way. You just have to. The only thing you can do is just to keep writing. And so to have her continually saying that to me got me through to the end of that first book and made me understand that stressful as it is, that's my process, and I just have to work with it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So your latest book has just come out in March, and that was The Paris Seamstress. So tell us about that. It's such a beautiful cover.
It is beautiful, I know. So yes, that's my third historical, and it's set in the 1940s, and it begins with Estella, the main character, and she's working at an atelier in Paris with her mother, and she has a dream that one day she might own her own atelier and be able to make her own designs, but it's June 1940 and the Germans are sweeping into France. And so she knows that given that set of circumstances, her dream's unlikely to ever come true. Then she gets caught up one night helping a resistance worker smuggle some maps, and it puts her life in danger, so she's forced to flee France, and she goes to New York. She realises there is no fashion industry, that basically the rest of the world copies Parisian designs, but now that Paris has been shut down by the Germans, that can't happen. So she wonders whether maybe New York is the place where her dream of designing her own clothes might finally come true. It also picks up with her granddaughter Fabienne in contemporary times, so it's a dual narrative, historical and contemporary. And Fabienne is trying to work out exactly what her grandmother Estella got up to during the Second World War and why it's had such a lasting impact on her and why she's never told Fabienne about it. So it's really interesting to write that dual narrative for the first time.
Brilliant. So I've listened to your other two books. I love the audio versions of your first two. So I'm waiting for this one to come out. And I love that you use really empowered, strong females. That really, in all of the books that I read so far, they definitely have that. So yay.
Yes.
And of course, your A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald dealt with an obstetrician, and how was that to write about? I mean, that's something that most people don't know about.
Yeah, and I think that's why I sort of naturally gravitate to those kinds of stories, because I think that there were so many women who did so many remarkable things throughout history, and because they did those things, I have all the opportunities now as a woman today that they didn't have. And if I hadn't have done those things, then I wouldn't have the opportunities that I do have. But that lots of their stories haven't been told and have been forgotten. And I think obviously, because history has primarily been written by male historians, and that is a shame because it means a lot of those women's stories have been lost. And, they did do really extraordinary things. I mean, I couldn't write about the exact person who was trying to become the first female obstetrician in New York City in A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, because I couldn't find a record of who she was. So her story is lost to history, and so my creation of Evie and making her that woman was an attempt to resurrect that woman's story and say, look, what she did was absolutely remarkable, because there was so much bullying and so much backlash against those early female medical students. And so here is her story, and it's worth telling, even though I've had to kind of make it up based on other accounts from other female medical students of the time. But if she hadn't have fought like that, then, medicine as an opportunity for women mightn't be as clear a path as it is these days. So I think that's why I'm drawn to those kinds of stories. Lots of women did do some very extraordinary and unusual things throughout history, and here are some different examples. And I like those kinds of stories, and the research, I find it very inspiring to see how hard these women fought and that they did not give up. And thank God they didn't, because it has given us the opportunities we have today.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember thinking in your second one where she was making the lipstick and all this, all these people saying you're not allowed to wear makeup and all this, and we just take it for granted.
That's so crazy, isn't it? And you're exactly right. We do take it for granted. Something like putting on rouge and not being fired because of it, or called a whore or something like that, which is what it's happened to those women who were the first ones to start wearing makeup out and about. So, we are lucky in a way that we have more freedom, but we only have that because of women like the ones that I write about.
That's it. And it was only, 100 years ago when this sort of stuff was happening. It's so recent.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. And also the other really tragic thing that I found, particularly in relation to A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, when I was talking to readers about that book, is so many current female medical students or practicing GPs or specialists would come up to me at the end of my talks and say to me, oh, that bullying that you've described, it's still really prevalent today. It's much more subtle than obviously what it was in Evie's time, where it was very blatant and very overt and very obvious. But it's still just as hard for women as it was back then, and it's still a very patriarchal system, and we still have to fight constantly. And I find that so disappointing, and I think that's what I really love about historical fiction. You know, in some ways it's look how far we've come. You know, the birthing practices, for instance, that Evie was forced to use are obviously very different to the birthing practices we have today, which are much more about letting the mother decide what will happen to her body. But historical fiction is also about look how far we still have to go, because whilst yes, the bullying is of a different nature, it's still there, and so we've still got so much work to do in those respects. So yeah, so I love historical fiction because it has that kind of looking back at the past and going, yay, we've done quite a lot, but then looking forward to the future and saying, no, we still have more work to do.
Yeah, we're only halfway through, really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow. So writing historical fiction, do you have any advice? Or, I mean, a lot of people who will be watching this maybe only read or write in contemporary times because it's easier, with quotation marks.
Yeah.
So tell us, how is it writing historical? Is there anything that we really need to think about?
Well, first of all, you have to choose exotic locations like Paris to set your books in so that you can travel there. No, I'm being facetious, but no, I think one of the big things for me is the research, and for me, it's really important to go to the places where my books are set specifically for research. And I know not everybody can do that, but I really feel like that makes such a big difference. I mean, I've been to Paris lots of times, but I still went there specifically to research the Paris Seamstress because there were things that I wanted to experience that I hadn't done as just a tourist. So I spent time in a Parisian atelier where they make the artificial flower decorations for haute couture gowns, which is what Estella does in the book. So I could see the women actually working on those and how the process and the camaraderie between the women in the atelier. And I spent lots of time walking through the Marais area of Paris, which is where the book is set, and you see features of the district that if you don't write about those features and include those, then you wouldn't be representing the Marais properly. So that was, and also there were so many things like the street that Estella lives on, which is called the Passage Saint-Paul. I found that street in the Marais, and I used that because when I walked past it, it looks like a dark, kind of dingy alleyway, and it has an apartment building kind of vaulting across the street. But then you can see this little pinpoint of light down the end. And I thought, what is that? I want to go down there and see. And so I did. And you walk down to the end, and there's actually a back entrance to this very spectacular church called the Église Saint-Paul Saint-Louis. And you walk into this church, and it's completely amazing. And you would have no idea that it was at the end of this alley. And I was like, oh, my God, my character has to live on this street. This street's so amazing. So, without having gone there, I would have just had to pick a street off a map that I could have looked at on Google Maps, but it's not quite the same as having that experience of discovery, and which I think really helps make historical fiction authentic. And you want the reader to be so immersed in the world that, I think you can only do that by having walked the streets and using the details that you see when you're walking the streets. So I think that's really important. If, in some way you can spend a lot of time on the research, it makes a big difference. But at the same time, I always write a first draft of my novels before I do the main bulk of the research. And for me, that's to find out what the story is so that it doesn't get laden down with research, because I think that can be a danger with historical fiction. And so then I do my research after that first draft. And so I'm researching to fill in the gaps that are in that first draft. I guess the first draft is like a research blueprint in a way. Whereas if I researched first, because I don't really know what the story is, I would do too much research and I wouldn't have a focused kind of scope, I guess. And then also I find that researching too early means you write to the research that tells it's possible, whereas you want that first draft to let their imagination run wild and to imagine what the story could be, and then use the research to support that rather than overwhelm that. And so I think that's another really important consideration in writing historical fiction too.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. And yeah, I totally agree. You should, if you can, go to those places and research.
Yeah.
I write contemporary and I still do that. I've still been out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for any kind of fiction to go to the places where you're setting it. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, you've got not just the physical places, but you've got how did they speak and what did they wear and what did they eat, those sorts of things too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I have a shelf full of books of things like, just daily life in the 1920s, for instance, when I was writing A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, which is all about, those kinds of things, like when were automobiles primarily in use. And so you don't want to have your character going, her family owning a car if it wasn't quite right for 1922, for instance. So you just need to find out those kinds of things. And appliances, when would they have had irons, for instance? So you that's really important to have those details, right? And language too. I mean, there's a fantastic online etymology dictionary, which I use all the time, which tells you the first known usage of every word and also when it was in common usage. So often there are little phrases and words that I just want to check, and I'll use that to make sure that it is right for the time period, because there's nothing worse than reading something and jolting out of the story because you think, oh, nobody would have said that back then. So I find I spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and I suppose if you do say something wrong in the book, someone's going to tell you about it.
Absolutely.
I don't want that. Yeah. So I mentioned that I've listened to your stories on audio. Have they been translated at all yet?
I have a translation of A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald coming up this year into Greek, which will be very exciting because obviously Greek is a different kind of script even to English, so I can't even imagine what that's going to look like and the cover and everything. So so I'm really looking forward to that because obviously my UK and US ones are all just, basically the same apart from changing some spellings for the US version. But the Greek one will be really exciting to see. So it's so hard still to imagine for me readers on the other side of the world reading my books. Like I can't quite get my head around that, and I don't think I will until someone sends me a photo of it in a bookshop in Greece or in the UK or in the US, and then I'll go, okay, right, now I believe it.
That's awesome. So you do a lot of workshops and mentoring, and I know when I was in Townsville, we got you up to do the workshop How to Write a Bestseller with the Australian Writers Centre, and that was just absolutely fantastic. I've used your information a lot from that. So tell us about workshops and mentoring and how often you do that and stuff.
Yeah, I love teaching. It's one of my, next to writing, it's one of my favourite things to do. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I had some really great teachers when I was learning. So, if I can help writers in any way, then I'd love to be able to do that. And also, I get really inspired and motivated by teaching because you're in a room full of people who are so enthusiastic and want to be there and are so keen to have their books published and to have readers reading them, and it reminds me of how lucky I really am. So I really love that. Unfortunately, because the books are kind of doing so well, and we've got them going out in the UK and the US this year, I've got less time to do teaching, so I'm doing less this year for the first time. But I'm still I've got a great program which I'm going to see if I can maybe roll out online next year so that I can do it with people other than people in Perth, which is a 6-month sort of intensive where we meet once a month for 6 months and we spend a couple of hours together. It's only a small group of 7 people. So we can really get into the nitty-gritty of their particular issues in relation to their manuscript. And hopefully, I'm hoping that by the end of the 6 months, the first session will set some goals, which might be to finish first draft or to redraft or something like that. And I'm hoping that with that kind of monthly commitment, they will be able to reach that goal by the end of the 6 months. So that'll be a really great thing to do face-to-face here in person in Perth this year, and then maybe online next year if I can see a way of that working. I wonder whether you get the same rapport with an online kind of group like that. I don't know, so I'll have to see. Maybe people can tell me if they think it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea. So,
and I was just in Sydney a couple of weeks ago teaching how to write a bestseller in Sydney, which I love teaching that course. That's one of my favourite courses, and that's always lots of fun. And then I always do a plotting masterclass and an introduction to novel writing each year, and they're coming up in August and November. So I have a few things going on, but less. I'm not doing any one-on-one mentoring this year, which is a shame, which I have done in the past. Just kind of doing what I can fit in, but always thinking about for next year, what else can I do to help people with the queries that I often get. Yeah.
And you're a big advocate of Scrivener. So
yes.
yeah, you've got an online course with Australian Writer Centre for that one, don't you?
Yes, I do. So it's called 2 Hours to Scrivener Power, and it basically takes you through all the things that I think are the really important things for writers to use in the program to be able to write their novel in a more efficient kind of way. I started using Scrivener when I was writing A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, and it literally changed my writing life because I am quite a chaotic writer. I do write a bit all over the place, so the way in which Scrivener works, where you just write in scenes and you can move things around so easily and have that beautiful colour-coded binder so you can see at a glance, particularly for Paris Seamstress, I guess, being a dual narrative, the colour coding was so good for me to be able to see how much time I'd been spending in the historical narrative versus the contemporary narrative, and also to track subplots. I mean, there's always a love story kind of subplot in my book, so tracking where that's coming into play and have there been too many gaps where those scenes haven't come into the story at all. So it's really absolutely changed the way I write, and I couldn't write in anything else. I hate it when I get to the end of the structural edit and I have to output it into Word. I'm like, no. The thing with Scrivener is there's so much in the program that it can be overwhelming when you sit down to work with it, and that's why I did the course, because it was to say, okay, yes, there's lots and lots of stuff in Scrivener, but if you just do these things that I teach in the 2 hours, then you can get so much out of it, and it can really transform your writing process, and don't worry about the other stuff until you're more proficient at everything that we cover in that 2 hours. So hopefully that makes life a bit easier for people with Scrivener, because it does have a bit of a learning curve.
It does, yeah. And a lot of people have said that they think it's too organised, and then they start doing it and they're like, no, I'm a plotter. I'm not a plotter. I'm a pantser, and I just want to do this bit there. And that's exactly why it's good. Like, I'm a complete plotter, and I have very, very, very well sorted out before I start writing. So it's great for me, but it is great for those people who like to just, wing it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're a plotter, you can use the binder to write your outline basically before you start writing, and it's got the outline function in there as well. So that's, again, why I love it, because no matter if you're a plotter or a pantser, it works for both kinds of ways of writing. So it's very flexible and very, very brilliant.
Yes, the number one program for writers.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So what are you working on now, Natasha?
So really, I'm juggling 3 books at the moment, because I've got lots of publicity stuff for the Paris Seamstress to do, which is really fun. I've just been in Sydney. I'm going to Brisbane at the end of May, just doing events and all that kind of thing, which I love. It's so nice to get out from behind the desk and go and talk to readers and have a kind of a dialogue rather than just a monologue with you on your computer. So there's that. Plus, I've just finished the structural edit for The French Photographer, which is the working title for next year's book. So that'll be out this time, late March, early April next year. And the copy edit for that's due in about a month or so. So I'm quite a long way ahead, which is nice. And I'm also about 75,000 words into a manuscript that I hope will be my 2020 book. So that's the first draft. So it's very rough and very all over the place. But so I'm juggling those 3 sort of things, which is always fun.
Excellent. So the French Photographer, I'm presuming, is French. So where's your 2020 going to be set?
So it's set in England largely. Cornwall, in fact, is a big important setting in that book. But it's also set a little bit in France and in Germany and in Sydney. So it kind of is moving all around the place, yeah.
So another international trip is getting planned.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in fact, I've already had to go to Europe late last year, so I did some of the research for that then. Spent lots of time in Cornwall. I was like, I have to set my book here. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'm really looking forward to the audio being available, so I can get the latest one, the Paris Seamstress, which just sounds immaculate. I can't wait. So where can we find you online?
So I'm pretty much everywhere online. So my website is just www.natashalester.com.au, but I also love hanging out on Facebook, so you can find me there as Natasha Lester Author, and of course Twitter and Instagram too. So pretty much if it exists online, I am there.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for that today. That was great.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It was so lovely to chat to you.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Jump onto my website, sarahwilliamsauthor.com, and join my mailing list to receive a free preview of my books and lots of inspiration. If you like the show and want it to continue, you can become a sponsor for just a couple of dollars a month. Go to patreon.com/sarahwilliamsauthor to find out more. And remember to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a review of the podcast. I'll be back next week with another loved up episode. Bye.